Hey guys, in this video, we will see user invalid CSS pseudo class. The user invalid is a CSS pseudo class that is under proposal in the CSS Selectors Level 4 working draft that selects a form element based on whether the value as entered by a user is valid when checked against what is specified as an accepted value in the HTML markup after the end user has interacted with the form beyond that input. In fact, user invalid has been called the user interaction pseudo class because it is unique in identifying a user action in selecting an element. Let's look at that with an example. For example, we have one form, okay? In form, we have one label, quantity, for example, okay? And let me add a for attribute, quantity, attribute, okay? With label, let's say you have an input field type is equal to number, okay, and id is equal to quantity. Let's take max value as 10 and mean value as 0, okay, and default value will be 11. Okay, so this is the form and here the rest of the elements. Okay, so this is the form. As you can see, let me add one class here, a bootstrap class, or you can say CSS library class. It should be input. Yeah, it looks fine now. So the numeric range set by the HTML markup for the input is between 1 and 10, right? The mean value is 0 and max is 10. So it is between 1 and 10, but the default value has been set to 11. This is 11. That means the value is invalid as soon as the form loads, right? So when the form is getting loaded, this value is invalid. However, the user invalid pseudo class will not take effect until after the user has actually interacted with the form beyond entering it in the field. That interaction is different between user invalid and invalid. There is also one CSS class, pseudo class called invalid, right? So it is different than user invalid. So there is a difference between them. The same principle applies for entered form values that are set by in range, out of range, and required. Right. So let's start writing the CSS input invalid here. Let's give color is equal to red, and let's see when page reloads. As you can see, CSS is getting applied. Input invalid. But if I write input user invalid and color is equal to yellow, so what it should do when this form loads, and by default it is applying user input invalid class, right? But once user started writing some values, it should apply user invalid class, this input user invalid pseudo class, and it should apply color yellow, right? Using one over the other or having distinct styling between these two might prove to be a better user experience in the real life case, right? But why it is not working at this moment in this Chrome browser, I will let you know later. It's worth calling out that when user invalid matches form elements that are invalid, out of range, or blank but required, it's doing so between the time the user has attempted to submit the form and before the user has interacted again with the form element. Right. So once the value that user has entered is determined to be an invalid entry, we can select that element. So one more important point here, browser support. It's only Firefox at the time of this video that supports this CSS property. So let's open Mozilla Firefox and see if it is working in Mozilla. Open in a while. It might take 1 or 2 more seconds. Yeah. So here, let me open, and this is 11 by default. And if I'm entering some other value, as you can see now, the is user input invalid. User invalid CSS is getting applied here. The color yellow, right? Let me make it green so we can double check. So once this is loaded, if it is 11, if it is 1, if it is 5, no CSS will apply. But if we enter 13, when you enter 13, it will apply this user input invalid CSS pseudo element. So this is working in Mozilla Firefox at this moment, but not in Chrome or Internet Explorer. So browser support is still a question here, but it should support in future that it is in browser specification draft 4. Okay, so that was all for this user invalid CSS pseudo selector. If you like this video, please give us a like. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please leave a comment. Thank you.